had back at first
November 10th.
November the 10th. So we will reconvene that meeting to further that business tonight. I'll turn it over to Anne Marie at this point.
Okay, Mayor, I think we're going to ask you, and I apologize for letting this slip off the agenda, but I think we're going to ask you to amend the agenda to add the recessed meeting from November 10th.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you so much for working with us on this tonight. So you recall at your November 10th meeting, Elizabeth Bryant, our planning director, presented the staff report, also presented the recommendation from the planning board. You heard from several members of the public about a rezoning application to rezone property along the south side of Mexico Road. The council was able to discuss the rezoning, asked questions, and Elizabeth responded, and I think everybody was in agreement that the rezoning met the standards and could be approved, but because we're operating under the state of emergency because of COVID, the council is not able to vote on matters in which they take public comment at that same meeting. The purpose is to give people who may be listening in remotely the chance to comment. And so we advertised that, and we did not receive any comments from any other members of the public. And you do recall at the public hearing that Morgan Francis requested that his tract of property be removed from the rezoning request. And that was not a problem, was it, Elizabeth? Was that okay? So good. So tonight we're asking that you consider a motion to approve the rezoning application with the exception of the tract owned by Mr. Francis, and that you also make a statement that the rezoning is consistent with the land use plan, with the town's land use plan. Am I good there, Elizabeth? Okay.
I make a motion that.
Yes, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Stallings, I make a motion that we approve the rezoning that has been requested by town staff with the exception of the Morgan Francis property. And I'd ask that we also find as a part of that motion that the rezoning is consistent with our land use plan.
Okay, thank you, Howard. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If so, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
And you can move to adjourn the recessed meeting.
Okay.
I make a motion to adjourn the recess.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn that special meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so now we'll carry on with our meeting, our special meeting here tonight. I welcome everybody here, and especially, and also the ones that are on social media. We thank you and we welcome you here with us. Especially, the first thing on our agenda tonight is a change of order on Queen Anne's Creek, the bulkhead project. And we have with us on Zoom tonight Derek Smith and Will Larson with the Wooten Company, and our own Corey Gooden, our Public Works Director. And they will walk us through the reasons and need for the change of order to this project. So I don't know who wants to take the floor first. Will,
Derek?
Will, the floor is yours.
I think Derek's going to take the lead, Mayor.
Okay, Derek, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Certainly pleasure to be in front of you tonight. I certainly wish I was there in person. It seems a whole lot easier behind a podium than it does behind a computer video screen, but we're getting used to it. So as everybody knows, we've been working on this project for several months now, and there has been just a big change in construction conditions. Unfortunately, just because of what has happened over the decades. And I think, Anne Marie, you should have a picture somewhere in that slide presentation that shows what that site looked like decades ago and all that was there with, and I can't see it on the screen, but it, you know, if it is something that can be pulled up, you can see where there is a lot of, I guess, fishing shacks, a lot of piers, a lot of activity down in that area, and over the years it's just been filled with a tremendous amount of debris. And we did do soil borings before the design started, so that we had some idea of what was there. Of course, we knew the concrete that was over top of the existing ground, that we had an idea that there was some debris there, had the soil borings done in a couple of locations, consulted with the gentleman that did the bulkhead at the adjoining property, and when it was all said and done, we found that yes, there was some debris that was about 9 feet down, but none of that debris, it's way at the end, Anne Marie, but none of that debris where the soil borings were done really posed an issue where the bulkhead was going to be, at least as close to the water as we could get with the drill rig. Once we got about 15, 20 feet in with driving those vinyl sheet piles, as this is being constructed, it is an excavation of the existing concrete and a driving of the sheet piles at the same time. We started realizing that we were hitting much larger debris than what was anticipated. And when I say larger debris, it was big slabs of asphalt, a lot of timber debris, things that vinyl sheet pile wasn't able to go through. So we, in talking back and forth with TJ Marine Construction, very reputable contractor in Eastern North Carolina, has done a lot of seawalls in his life, came with a recommendation that we can go to a little bit stouter wall thickness, a little better grade vinyl, which would help some, and rather than going to an extreme length of vinyl, we can armor that on the face of it with some riprap where we need to in some of the deeper locations, and which is another change of conditions. When we first did the soundings out there before the design, we were looking at water depths of somewhere around 5 to 6 feet. Between the last 12 months, there are sections where there are some holes that are showing some water depths around 12 feet. And that's where we run into an issue where we're going to need some of that armoring of the riprap to help prevent that seawall from moving on us in the future. So those are the biggest considerations. Even with, this is primarily a grant project, there was some town participation based on the original budget, and for the seawall portion of the construction, we are still within the grant, even with the addition of this change order. So really it's at the point where we are much better off to address this issue now than to try to push it down the road.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. Any questions from anyone up here? Derek, go ahead.
Couple of questions. I can understand why we need to strengthen the bulkhead. I don't understand why we need to put the rock in it. It seems in the report it said this would be beneficial to put in 450 tons of rock. I'm concerned about the creek. It's one of the beautiful sites in our community. It's used for kayaking, and already we've taken out the kayak ramp right next to the bridge. It just seems putting all that stone in there, it's just complicated the problem and not adding to the scenic nature of the creek.
So the kayak launch has been removed for the construction of the project, but there will be a new kayak launch that gets installed to the east of the bridge. Is that correct, Anne Marie?
Yes, and Corey can explain why we had to relocate the kayak launch.
Yeah, and so we did do that with the intentions of really kind of two end products. One being a new kayak launch here. We may need some further discussion about the location that we can talk about at a different time. There will be an additional kayak launch there. I've been working with the rec department to try to find something that's ADA compliant, to something that we can purchase and have installed to basically be a replacement. It won't be similar to what was there, but it would be more appropriate kayak launch. And so we have found some options. We're waiting to hear back from them, but we are planning on installing something similar to what was there in the Sunfish Park location to allow kayaks to go out there as well as some of the wider sunfish boats for the small sailboats. So we will have replacements, and we actually will have two now instead of one.
So we will have access to Queen Anne
Yes.
Creek,
Yeah.
directly onto the creek.
Yes.
The bay is pretty rough sometimes for kayaking,
Yeah.
And, that,
at my level.
and so spoke with the contractor about this today. We had originally discussed the side east of Hayes Bridge, but we're actually reconsidering potentially between Elizabeth Van Moore Park and Hayes Bridge to prevent some of that tidal surge from the bay. So we may have found the reasoning why it was in that one location. It was a little better suited for getting on and off kayaks. So that may be the new location.
And Derek, I don't know if you can see the photo that we have up, but I think it would be
All I can see is your screen that says bulkhead picture with all of the reports and.
Okay. So Corey took a photo of the existing site as it stands today with the bulkhead installed, but then you see that area between the bulkhead and the shoreline. And so maybe it would be helpful if you explained where the rock is going to be placed.
Is there any way I can see the picture?
I'm sorry.
Well, and I spoke with the contractor today about this to try to get a good understanding of exactly where the placement is. And there will be some wash stone that's added on the back side of the sheeting closer to the land, but to help shore up with as much excavation as they had to do, the majority of that additional stone will actually be on the outside of the bulkhead, but it will be below the water surface. And the intent behind that is to add some additional strength or shoring there to try to help keep the bottoms of those sheets from being able to move or twist, because we will have some force that pushes out from when they do the backfill on the land side of the sheeting. And so one of the things they're adding there is, because we're now at that longer depth, longer sheets than what we had before, that they're going to add new stone material below the water surface on the creek side of the sheeting to kind of help protect that.
So Corey, we're not going to see the riprap.
No.
Correct.
It will be below the surface.
And you'll probably be about 6 feet out from the base of the wall at the deepest sections, and then it runs at about a 1-to-1 slope back towards the wall to brace that. So when you're driving these sheet piles in an ideal situation, you want as much vinyl from the mud line to the very top of the wall as you have from the mud line to the bottom of the wall, and in virgin ground. And what that does is that gives that wall the cantilevered support to keep it from flexing on you. When you have a situation like this where we had to do so much excavation behind the wall to remove that asphalt and wood debris and things that they couldn't drive the vinyl through, then you don't have that support on both sides of it anymore. And when we backfill behind it with this new material and compact it so that it doesn't settle over time, it's gonna create more pressure on that outside face of the wall. And that's the purpose for having this additional support at the base of it in the deeper sections to keep that held back.
So it's not gonna take away any surface area of the creek as we look at it and enjoy it.
Any other questions of Derek or Corey? Okay, any further discussion on the issue, period? If not, I'll need a motion to approve the change order.
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, the next is a change of order on the street paving project for Pembroke Circle in Batham and West Second Street. And again, we have Derek Smith and Will Larson and Corey Gooden, our own Corey Gooden, to help us with the discussion. So, Derek, it's your show at this point.
So, as everybody knows, we bid this project some time ago. Took a little while to get through some LGC issues and some funding, but we're finally under contract, underway. Barnhill Contracting is scheduled to come in the week after Thanksgiving and get started on this to hopefully knock it out this year. At least knock out the sections that have been disrupted with the sewer project, first and foremost. Thankfully, as you know, we put together a construction estimate prior to, or as we're doing the design of the project and figuring out what the project scope is. The projects came in, or the bids came in very favorable. Barnhill has been a good partner in the past on the other projects. And as a result of that, I'm able to add in some additional work. And a lot of that has to do with, as you saw, with the gas prices in the last year, liquid asphalt prices dropped. As that liquid asphalt index drops, then your asphalt prices drop at the plant. So, pretty fortunate to be able to take advantage of some of that and add in some additional streets and also add in Pembroke Circle, which has been a point of issue for Corey for quite a while from a stormwater perspective. So the goal there is to elevate a portion of that, kind of the bottom of that horseshoe, if you will, to elevate that area. I think we discussed, about 8 or 9 inches, Corey?
Yeah, that's correct.
Which will, in essence, create more freeboard from the bay being able to come back into that area and flood that section of road out. So we've got a good game plan there. We've got a budget put together from Barnhill that we all agree with. And I think from that, and we're still within what the original construction budget was. So I think, everything's kind of coming into place to be able to finally mark that stormwater project off the list, as well as repave a street that's in need of it.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Corey, do you have anything to add to what he said?
Not unless anyone has any questions about.
Anybody have any questions of either Derek or Corey?
So you're just doing that U down at the bottom, maybe going from like Manley's house around, maybe up to the Adams house?
So the project would begin closer to the Reinhardt and Johnson property boundary, and work its way back around towards the Hope property.
Is it in the contract to widen that out? 'Cause if a bus come by and you passing a bus or a truck or something, they got to get off pavement. That's really not wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass.
So one of the sections for the change order from the phase 2 that we're looking at is the intersection of Second and Batham. And there are gonna be some improvements made, for stormwater as well as the width of that intersection. And I don't know if there were any plans to do any widening between there and, Virginia Road
Paradise Road.
or Paradise. But I do know that there will be some improvements and some things made to allow for larger vehicles when they approach that intersection from either Second, towards Broad or Broad towards Stratford, and from Paradise down, there will be some improvements in that area. But I don't remember if there were any widening that,
I think we talked about it at our pre-construction meeting, so that's something that we can look at with Barnhill to see, does the town have, because that came up during the CDS project, the conditional use permit, about could we widen Batham just a little bit, because if you widen it, well, we don't have much right of way, but if we can, we will.
Are you looking at that as a most a foot on each side? You can
I
even
don't
do that, it's really, I know it's really tight.
and we'll work through more of that, with I guess some of the CVS work that we're doing to kind of get an idea of what we need to do off of coming in from Virginia Road if that road is realigned. That would, I guess, give us an idea of what's needed. But as far as the right-of-ways, I think we only had an electric easement that was on the north side of Batham, and I think that the actual road right-of-way, we were at its widest.
But we'll check and
But
see, if
we'll
we
definitely-
can squeeze some more, we will.
Corey, at the intersection of Second and Batham, will a 18-wheeler eventually be able to maneuver around
So
that intersection?
what when Derek and Jimmy and I met to walk through these change orders particularly for that one section, we did go with a standard width for an intersection for larger vehicles, considering that there were some industrial commercial centers north of Second Street. So that is the intent, is to have it wide enough for a large panel truck or some type of 18-wheeler to be able to navigate that intersection.
But the street itself, Second Street itself is not gonna be widened, right?
No, not at this
Not
time.
Second.
Just at the intersection.
Just at
Doesn't
the
have-
intersection.
Well, 18-wheeler shouldn't be going in, that should be.
Exactly, I agree with that.
Because that's a very narrow street.
Yeah.
I think that the very little 18-wheelers use that.
I think most of that traffic comes in off of Virginia Road or either Paradise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In and out.
The times I've seen it, that's where it's kind of.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we did notice was some of your larger, like panel type trucks that may come in off of Second from Broad Street towards the restaurant equipment area or the AC unit. It really wasn't an 18-wheeler, but it was a larger kind of commercial truck or van that kind of needed to make that turn.
Yeah.
Well, there again, they can still come in from, Junior Road or from Paradise. You know.
And
Most
more-
of these drivers know, they know where they can go and where they can't.
I think it's mostly from Paradise, that's what
Yeah.
they open.
Okay, any further questions, of Derek or Corey? Okay, at this time, I'll take a motion to,
Mayor, I move that we approve the change order for the street repaving project at Pembroke
okay.
at West Side Street.
Second. Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'm just happy Pembroke area is being addressed. Really, that's great. I know it's gonna, heavy rain, it's a flood down there. I know those people are gonna be happy. It's correct.
Any further discussion?
Thanks to Corey for coming up with that solution on Pembroke
Yes.
Creek, because I believe, he won't brag about it, but I believe his solution saves us a lot of money, all right?
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item C is a budget amendment for capital projects budgets, ordinance, street paving project. And we'll call on Ms. Knighton for that.
Yes, Mayor, we had reviewed this with the mayor and council, I think it was back in your September and October meeting where you approved the actual change order, but we needed to have Virginia prepare the capital project budget ordinance to reflect the project. And you'll see that we have revenue coming from the I&I project that will pay for some of the utility cuts that are being paved, and then also from water and sewer fund to pay for the roads that are going to be resurfaced that were torn up for the new water and sewer, for the new sewer lines. And we recommend approval of the project ordinance as presented.
Any questions of Anne Marie on this? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, and item D is a capital projects budget ordinance for water and sewer street repairs and paving. And I'll ask Ms. Knighton if she will to discuss that for us.
Mayor, and I'm sorry, I got out of order, so I gave you the description for this capital project ordinance for the water and sewer street repairs. What you had called on me to give the description of was the capital budget ordinance for the street paving project to reflect the Pembroke Circle and the Batham Road and Second Street intersection improvements, and I'm sorry. So
Sad thing is nobody called it but you.
I saw a couple eyes raised. So I think in order for the record, if you can ask for what do we need to, a motion?
Well,
They
they
made
made
the
a motion on
motion.
that, so
Yep.
I
So
think
you're okay?
I'll just change it.
Yeah, we'll get it straight.
Yeah, I think with that explanation, we're good to go with the
Yes.
motion as it
Yeah.
is.
So you do need a motion and a second to adopt the water and sewer street repairs budget
Okay.
ordinance.
Any more questions from Ms. Knighton on that? Okay, if not, I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then item E is Hurricane Dorian project budget ordinance. And I'll call on Ms. Knighton again.
And I'll try to get this one correct for you out of the gate. We are really excited to present this budget ordinance. We have worked really hard, Corey in particular, Bud Powell, Virginia, and Tammy, to get all of the paperwork submitted to FEMA that will fund repairs to damaged infrastructure at the waterfront that occurred back in Hurricane Dorian. It takes that long sometimes to get projects approved for permanent repair work. But FEMA informed us last week that our request for funding has been approved. We didn't get all the money that we wanted, but we got a significant amount. And Virginia prepared the budget ordinance, and you'll see $215,403 will come in from FEMA on the revenue side, and then there's $138,600 that will be used to repair 5 of the panels that comprise the wave break system under the breakwater. So that's terrific news. They were damaged during Hurricane Dorian. What we call Sunfish Park, the area over near the Conger Building, that bulkhead took a beating from Hurricane Dorian, and this project will reimburse the town $54,600 to replace bulkhead there. And then the cannon strip, and a lot of you have asked over the last many months, when are we gonna fix that? It looks bad. And we were waiting for this funding, and it's $22,120, and that will pay to install riprap that was originally installed back in 2011, I think, is when we did that. And that riprap is generally placed in the bay, and you really don't see it unless the way the wind is blowing and the level of the water is low. You'll see the riprap, but normal water levels, you don't see it. And we will be coming back to you for an amendment. We want to add more area to have riprap. The state would only, and FEMA would only pay for what was installed previously and lost. But we think to shore it up and make sure that we don't get a lot of overwash on the cannon strip, that we need to add more to the areas that previously weren't covered. So, Mayor, it's a long explanation, but it's a great project, and it reflects a lot of teamwork, and we're really excited to get the approval so we can go ahead and start putting things back together on the waterfront.
I've got a question, just a history lesson. How often do we have to make those sort of repairs to the cannon strip? Is that something that we can expect every 8, 9, 10 years?
That's a great question. We, for many years, never had a problem. And
Right.
it's just, it's been, I would say, right around, it first started happening around 2005, 2006, and Public Works would put fabric down and sod, and it would hold for a while, and then, we've had more and more storms and more damage. So we're hoping that by expanding, again, areas where we don't presently have riprap, that might prolong, preserve the cannon strip for a longer period of time.
Thank you, Craig.
I just want to say kudos to Corey. Have we ever had so much infrastructure projects going on at one time? Corey, I don't know how you sleep at night, keeping up with everything that's going on. Because you drive around town and you see this going on, you see this going on, this is going to start, and it's all coming together now. It's great.
Well, a lot of these, thank you, but a lot of the supervisors have been really good as far as picking up once some of the administrative side is done and fielding that street work, or and they've been a really big help in the crews. But the biggest thing, I guess, has been juggling the normal day-to-day in addition to these. That's been quite a challenge. But
Thank you.
Any other questions of Ms. Knighton? Any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the Hurricane Dorian's project budget ordinance.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And the next is item F, Disaster Assistance Agreement for North Carolina Department of Public Safety, Hurricane Dorian repairs to bulkhead at Sunfish Park and Cannon Strip. And Maria,
Thank you,
calling you
Mayor.
again.
And Virginia has done a great job learning and navigating the state and the state's what they call portal system for all of our disaster assistance agreements. So we ask that you formally approve this agreement, and that will make us right with the auditor that we had a grant agreement to be able to spend money and then be reimbursed.
Any questions to Ms. Knight on that?
Move to approve the assistant agreement.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. We have a motion and a second, all those in favor, or excuse me, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And that takes care of all of our budget amendments for the night. And the next is our Human Relations Commission. And as you know, we spent a lot of time on that, trying to decide the people to put on that committee. And as you know, we had 25 applicants on that, and we had a tough time trying to decide on who to put on there. So on behalf of myself and the council, it's my pleasure to inform the following people of your appointment to serve as a member of the town's Human Relations Commission. The work of the commission is vitally important and no doubt will be difficult, but your mayor and council firmly believe you have the life experiences, skills, and heart to make Edenton a better place for all. Mayor Pro Tem Elton Bond Jr. has been appointed to serve as council liaison to the commission. Both Anne Marie and I plan to assist Mayor Pro Tem Bond, you and fellow commission members as you begin this important work. And following are the members of the commission's statement and the objectives of the work. All right, those that were appointed to the committee are Sally Blunt, Stella Brothers, Jim Chesson, Miles Cox, Percy Foxwell, Missy Harrell, Rebecca Hearn, Marshall Jordan, John Moorhead, Reverend John R. Shannon, Darnell White, Patricia White. And the alternate commission members are Dr. Emma Donner and Dr. Cynthia Marie Herlong. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the liaison to the town council is Mayor Pro Tem Elton Bond Jr. We also want to thank the ones who were not chosen. We thank you for your interest in serving on the town's Human Relations Commission. And unfortunately, as you know, the council received 25 applications for a 12-member commission. I am sorry to report that you were not selected to serve at this time, but cannot thank you enough for your willingness to work to make Edenton a better place for all. We will keep your application on file in case vacancies occur on the Human Relations Commission. Also, we would ask that you please consider serving on a special task force to study and create meaningful ways to expand and promote Edenton's African American history. We ask that you consider applying to serve on a town or county advisory board. So we thank you for that, and I believe Ms. Knight is going to be sending out a letter to each person that was not chosen, and you can also inform the ones that were chosen. So thank you to each one of you that did apply. We tried to do this as equitably as we could. As you heard the names, we've got 6 blacks and 6 whites on there. And we didn't intend it, we didn't really choose it this way, but we got 6 men and 6 women as well. So, but thank each and every one of you that did apply, and we're looking forward to this program getting started and for the betterment of Edenton and our community.
Mayor, I want to thank the task force that was involved in it. Councilman Coleman, Councilman High, and Councilman Bond, for all the work they put into it.
They did a great job, and we did a good job of choosing the people that we felt like would do the better job and didn't have personal agendas and this type of thing. So thank you to all who was involved in this project. Okay, so that moves us to our committee meetings, and the first on there is Public Works Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Craig Miller.
Mayor, we have two items on the agenda, the stormwater feasibility study and an update on the East Eden Street stormwater project. Both these items do not require action by the council, just let you know that. Mayor, the completed stormwater feasibility study has helped our Public Works Department identify problem areas around town, and the study made recommendations on how best to improve these identified problems. Town wishes to thank Will Larson, a project engineer from the Wooten Company, for securing a grant from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to fund the storm water feasibility study. The East Eden Street stormwater project is an example of what we can do to improve stormwater issues in town, such as remove the contaminants from the water before the discharge actually reaches the bay, and two, provide more storage capacity during extremely heavy rain occurrences. With us tonight, we have Corey Gooden, our Public Works Director, and Will Larson. And I'm going to ask them to kind of give an update on the East Eden Street stormwater project. Corey, Will. Thank you, Will.
I will.
Good evening, Council. I hope you all are doing well. To echo some of Derek's comments, we always appreciate the opportunity to speak to Council. We certainly wish this was an in-person presentation as opposed to the virtual, but given the hand we're dealt, we're working as best we can for the town. Tonight, as you just stated, I have the pleasure of updating you on two separate stormwater projects that, between the cooperation of the town and the Wooten Company, as you mentioned, we were very fortunate to receive the maximum allowable grant for both opportunities. The first opportunity that I'll discuss would be the stormwater feasibility study. To give you a very brief history of where we got to, or where we started and where we are today. As in your council packet as mentioned, in 2017, the Wooten Company provided a overview of the main watershed in downtown Edenton. This is a 74-acre watershed that culminates at the East Water Street pump station. As you all vividly recall, this watershed has presented a continual pattern, especially in recent years, of nuances and nuisance problems for the surrounding residents. This includes localized flooding during storm events. It includes backups into the upstream stormwater system. And this was really the defining point that started all of the need for the discussion and the evaluation of not only this 74-acre watershed, but also some of the other critical points within the Edenton system. Fast forward a couple years into the fall of 2018, again, working with town staff, the Wooten Company was able to apply for a 50-50 grant for the stormwater feasibility study. This study is sponsored by the Division of Water Resources and is considered a Water Resources Development Grant is the particular name. It had a limit of $25,000 match, so therefore the town contributed $25,000 as well as DWR contributed the 50-50 match. You should have in your council packet a slide of about 22 slides in particular regarding the feasibility study. And I'll fast forward through these fairly quickly, and by all means, please grab my attention and I'll be happy to answer questions either as we go or at the end. But this condenses what has now been about a year-long study into the town's system. I can be glad to give you a copy of the report. It's only about 150 to 200 pages, a very light read for anybody with insomnia. But what is included in the report is a high-level overview of the town's stormwater system. Starting to dive into the report a little bit, and not knowing the avenue that you guys are able to view it, I'll call out the slides as we go along, but looking at slide 2 with the overview of the report, we are all well aware that Edenton is a coastal town. With that comes the responsibility and the opportunity for the town to highlight its nature and its proximity to this water body, Edenton Bay. This water body has provided not only the lifeblood of Edenton history, but also gives the town the opportunity to extend its tourism as well as livelihood amongst its citizens, as well as invited guests, being tourists from the state and the surrounding region. Going on to slide number 3, what we have been able to culminate through a 2009 study effort, moving up to the current effort, of which most of the mapping took place in 2019, is the town of Edenton's system ranges roughly from 10-inch all the way up to 36-inch stormwater transportation piping. You'll see in your slides we have listed CMP, which is corrugated metal piping, as well as RCP, which is reinforced concrete piping. These are typical of today's technology. I will state we did not put a total linear footage of drainage piping into the study or this presentation, because quite frankly, it is a very difficult number to ascertain. Many of the stormwater structures within the system certainly predate me and my experience, but also predate anybody amongst town staff. The catch basins and some of the other attributes of the system do not provide readily accessible access to either staff or particularly third party, in this case the Wooten Company, some of our crews to be able to access the catch basins or access the features, and more importantly to map them upstream. As I mentioned, Edenton has a long historic history of stormwater as well as transportation of stormwater from the uplands down to Edenton Bay. But through the course of Edenton's history, much of that system has become buried. Even in the the Eden Street project that we'll discuss momentarily, we discovered a couple of things there that were unbeknownst to town staff or the Wooten Company, as well as some of the neighboring residents, folks that are there on a day-to-day basis. So as you can see in slide number 3, we've roughly identified the project area as the ETJ of Edenton. Certainly this is the primary area that contains all the open channel as well as closed channel structures and transportation devices. And we provide a brief rundown of approximately 420 catch basins, 96 drop inlets, so on and so forth. And what these represent are readily accessible and definable structures that make up the larger system as a whole. Moving on into slide 4, really the meat and potatoes of this report stems around what we refer to as hotspots. These are areas within the system that show frequent or routine flooding events, and we'll define how we compared some of these here momentarily. But within the system, using the assistance of town staff as well as some historical documentation, we were able to identify 8 specific problem areas. And we have those listed, including Virginia Road and Granville Street, the Pembroke Circle that was just discussed with the street resurfacing project, East Queen Street, East Eden Street, East King Street, East Water Street, the Chesapeake and Albemarle Railroad block, and finally there's an unnamed tributary off of Old Hertford Road. Looking at these hotspots, we evaluated each of them based on a matrix that you'll see in a future slide, making sure that we can readily compare apples to apples and represent each of these 8 hotspots, which are built of varying drainage areas. They're built of varying neighbors and adjoining properties. And the matrix allows us to find common denominators and make sure that we're equally comparing them against their peers. Not only that, but we were able to look at the proximity of available town parcels, particularly vacant town parcels. These provide an opportunity for the town to readily integrate an existing parcel under town ownership and town control and utilize that parcel to provide a betterment for the stormwater system. A prime example of this, which again we'll discuss momentarily, is the Edenton Street Stormwater Improvement Project. Finally, a couple of the things that we looked at were some of the surrounding topography, as well as the general land use around each of these hotspots, and what existing infrastructure is in place. Moving on into the next several slides, what we've identified here, we provided you just a blown up picture of each of the 8 hotspots within the system. The yellow hatching around each of these is a rough approximation of the critical area of the hotspot, or areas that are most likely to see flooding, either through historical events or looking into the potential of future events. And we can certainly go into detail of these, but we'll just provide a brief overview of each. What you'll see throughout each of these slides is that we provided a couple notable features. For instance, in hotspot number 1, Virginia Road and North Granville Street. This is an area that is of commercial and institutional land use. There is an existing constructed wetland project that was done back in 2016, 2017 in the town. And we've provided an approximate improvement cost. And while that certainly is a lot of digits and a lot of big numbers at $353,000 in this particular case, we'll kind of dive in here momentarily and show you some of the reasons why we threw these costs in there. And also to reiterate that these costs, while our estimates, are certainly open to discussion and should be seen as more of a floating cost or an opportunity rather than a fixed number. So moving through these, and again, please stop me if you have any specific questions, but looking at slide number 6, which is Pembroke Circle, as mentioned during the streets discussion, there are improvements that are going on for this particular hotspot through your streets project. We did include a improvement cost of about $150,000, which in this case would be bulkhead extension. Looking at site number 3, which is slide number 7, with East Queen Street, you'll notice with slide number 7, or hotspots 3, 4, and 5, these really play into each other as East Queen Street as well as East King Street are upstream and part of the same system as the Edenton Street transportation and infrastructure. Each of these is within that 74-acre high-density residential historic watershed that I mentioned at the beginning. These present an opportunity for improvement, but a very complex improvement is what would be required. Certainly, each of these areas has specific issues with regard to flooding, but at the same time, any improvements that would need to be made through here, the historic nature of those areas and maintaining that historic draw would have to be first and foremost. Not only that, but each of these areas also has many different types of neighbors, both residential, commercial, as well as historic neighbors that would certainly have to be evaluated and made accommodations for with any type of future improvement. Of particular interest, we'll go on to slide number 10, which is the East Water Street. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the source of a lot of the discussion that has precipitated the feasibility study, the Edenton Street improvement project, the bulkhead project that Derek discussed a little while earlier, as well as some of the improvements that the town has already made within the system. As we know, this is one of the most notable locations within town. Not only that, but it also seems to be the most problematic location in town from a stormwater standpoint. There's been much attention geared towards improvement through the addition of yard inlets and additional piping into the stormwater pump station. As Anne-Marie and Derek and Corey have discussed already, there's been a lot of effort geared towards the Hamlet grant and the extension of the bulkhead, which again will mitigate some of the tropical events and nor'easter events that are common to overtop the banks and create a recycled pumping event where essentially you have bay water entering into the pump station then pumping water back into the bay for the water to enter the pump station again, and it creates an ongoing cycle, all of which creates upstream flooding. Through each of these small improvements, we're gaining on this proverbial elephant, and we are making a betterment and steps towards the right direction with every step along the way. Moving on through the last two hotspots, which are number 7, Chesapeake and Albemarle Railroad Block, as well as the unnamed tributary near Old Hertford Road. Both of these are open channel structures, i.e. drainage ditches. They typically experience flooding during tropical events, nor'easter events, events where the Edenton Bay has been elevated due to some larger scale weather event. And both of these particular areas, the improvements are geared towards transportation of water. How quickly can we get water into the ditch, and more importantly, how quickly can we get the water to move downstream? We have included a couple of attenuation recommendations, essentially capturing some of that storm water, temporarily holding that storm water until most of the flood water has receded, thereby allowing that water to more efficiently move away from the system. But the namesake of these two areas is to transport the water away from these sites as quickly as possible. I'll be glad to circle back to any of those areas in particular. One thing that we will, or we have included in the study, is a table in which we included a vast majority of current stormwater control measure technologies. These range anywhere from wet detention basins, dry detention basins, bio-retention basins, which are also known as rain gardens. We looked at a couple of avenues such as green roofs, permeable pavement, stormwater or downspout disconnects, essentially taking the rainwater disconnects away from the house, disconnecting them from a gray system and trying to create more of an infiltration using residential property. And there's several others within the table that were evaluated. That was done for each of these 8 areas, and within that table you'll notice that we provided an indicator, if you will, showing what was deemed a feasible alternative and what was deemed an infeasible alternative. Moving forward, the town has the opportunity to revisit these 8 hotspots as they see fit, as funding becomes available, as need becomes available, whether that be through future tropical events, future infrastructure projects, persistent customer complaints, whatever the case may be. The namesake of this feasibility report was to provide the town the opportunity to identify what is a feasible alternative and to give them kind of the bounds of how to then provide or to move forward into a more traditional engineering study, engineering design, and at the end of the day, a construction-ready project. Looking into slide number 13, as I mentioned, we utilized a matrix when we were evaluating each of the 8 hotspots within the town. Most notably, the safety and property damage component of analysis was first and foremost. You'll see in this slide that we utilized a scale ranging from 0 to 10. 0 meaning any type of flooding event would create 0 damage, all the way up to a score of 10, which presents the opportunity for loss of life or limb. Utilizing this, you multiply that against the frequency of flooding. How often does a given site flood? Is this a once a month type thing? Is this a once every 10 years type thing? Is it only held to tropical events? Multiplying those 2 components, you then start looking into how widespread is the impact of this particular hotspot. Looking into criteria 3, you can see that we evaluated each hotspot on the basis of the number of properties affected, ranging from a singular property with a score of 2, all the way up to instances where 20 or greater properties would be impacted by a given flooding event. And then finally, under criteria number 4, we have analyzed the feasibility of a given solution. Just because we have a problem, just because we know what potential solution it may be, how feasible is that opportunity, both from a constructability standpoint, from a impact standpoint to neighboring properties and the livelihood of the town, as well as from an economic standpoint. If you have a $20 million solution, that may be great, but if the town cannot afford $20 million, it doesn't do the town, the residents, or the community any good. Utilizing each of these 4 criteria, you'll see on slide number 14, we provided a hotspot ranking comparison. Again, utilizing these, we were able to quantify each of the impacts from these hotspots, and to no surprise of anybody listening or that took part of the study, East Water Street was the #1 ranked hotspot with a total score of 36. These scores ranked all the way from 36 down to Court Street, which had a score of 10. Of particular note, you'll notice number 4, which is Virginia Road and Granville Street, and number 5, Chesapeake and Albemarle Road, had a shared total score. The way that we have approached this in previous projects and maintained through this project is we looked at a tiebreaker in that first column, the safety and damage. Even though they had a same total score, Virginia Road has the opportunity and the potential to create a higher impact to safety and damage. Therefore, it takes precedence over the ranking of the Chesapeake and Albemarle Road block. Slide number 15 refers back to the feasibility chart that I recommended earlier. Again, this shows a listing of the readily available and approved through the state of North Carolina SCM techniques and technologies, ranging anywhere from soil amendments, green roofs, downspout disconnections, all the way through some of the engineered technology, which would be the contact chambers or the Filterra chambers, which we will be utilizing on the Eden Street project. Slide number 16 shows the estimated cost of capital improvements. And what you'll notice here is that we have tried to break out the individual projects as well as provide priority rankings or priority schedules against them. The first couple projects listed, number 4, the feasibility study, number 6, which is the East Water Street, and number 2, the Pembroke Circle. These are projects in which the town already has funding in place and the projects are active. We have them shown in this year's fiscal cycle, but these are projects that are already in the works, and the town does not need to consider these for future budgeting exercises. Moving down the matrix to the unfunded projects, you'll see that we have taken the remaining hotspot areas. We have taken the estimated cost for each of these and made an opportunity to project them forward into priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 projects. Obviously, priority 1 indicates a sooner need than priority 2 and priority 3. Starting with the East Water Street remaining mitigation actions. Again, you will notice that these are very large numbers. Notably, of the East Water Street is roughly about $900,000. We've broken it into 2 fiscal cycles. Please do not take this as set in stone. We are merely making a recommendation for an attack approach that the town may consider. There are many other pieces of this puzzle that would have to come into play through funding opportunities, again, through ongoing specific needs within the town that would come into play as far as making definable actions and taking credible steps towards implementation of any of these given improvement opportunities. Now that we've talked about what was studied, we've talked about some of the findings of the study, we've talked about some of the estimated construction cost of these improvements. The final couple of slides of this presentation deal with opportunities or ways that the town can look to begin raising funds and provide the revenue required to implement some of these improvement projects. Slide number 17 shows a summary of the estimated improvement cost. If you take all of the current unfunded projects, it shows to about $3.9 million of needed improvement opportunities. We have distributed this over the next 20 years, and roughly this works out to about $200,000 per year. Within the town of Edenton, you represent about 1,650 customers. 1,200 to 1,300 of those represent residential customers. The balance of approximately 400 represent non-residential customers, either institutions, industries, commercial businesses, or government users within the system. So roughly speaking, you have about 77% of your customer base being residential, 23% being non-residential. Within the report, we evaluated 3 distinct fee opportunities and options. Looking at slide 18 is the flat stormwater fee. Within the stormwater fee, every single user within the system would share a uniform cost, regardless of property size, regardless of impervious area amongst the property. This approach would apply a flat monthly stormwater fee. Using the $195,000 or $200,000 for easy math number against the current customer count, this would work out to roughly about $10 per customer per month. As you can see on the slide, some of the pros for this approach would be on the town staffing side. This is the the least path of obligation or the least burdensome fee structure. Every single bill would be applied with the same fee, again, regardless of size, regardless of use, regardless of impervious area. Essentially, just a flat stormwater fee would be applied to every single customer within the town. As far as the citizens are concerned, this is a very intuitive approach. It is not a complex approach that every single customer shares the same cost every single month. On the flip side, some of the negatives of this approach are certainly it is not proportional to the impact of the system. Large institutional, large industrial customers that have acres of impervious area are treated the same as those who live on a quarter-acre lot that have rain gardens and mainly pervious surfaces. In addition, the financial burden of this approach, you share a 1-to-1 ratio between residential customers to commercial customers. 77% of the revenue generated would be from residential customers, which is the same percentage as the count of residential customers. Therefore, as I mentioned, there is zero proportionality with respect to revenue generated. Looking into option number 2, this starts to flip the tables a little bit and looks at direct proportionality. Through option number 2, which is a property-specific fee, what the town could approach this as would be to apply a flat fee against all residential customers. The remaining balance of the revenue that is generated would be boiled down to a per acre of impervious area cost. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide that we have estimated about 350 acres. This is an assumed value. A more specific takeoff would be required before any definable numbers be set. But for the purpose of the study, 345 to 350 acres of impervious area was used. Looking at slide number 20, we provided an example of how this rate structure would be perceived. With a flat residential fee of $6 per month, this shows a $72 a year financial obligation to residential customers. The remaining balance of revenue would have to stem from commercial, industrial, non-residential users. In this particular instance, using the 350 impervious acres, essentially each of your industrial or non-residential customers would be charged about $275 per year per impervious acre. If you've been able to follow me through this explanation, you can see that starting with the negatives, this is a very complex method of raising stormwater fees. This would require extensive communication and effort amongst town staff. Essentially, an individual unique takeoff would have to be done for every one of the 375 non-residential properties around the town. In addition, those would have to be done for any type of new development that may come to the town. Any type of site redevelopment or site improvement may cause a change to the type of revenue generated. In addition, this opportunity also creates the potential for a little bit of confusion as well as conflict, that certain customers may deem certain areas pervious, whereas town staff or a third party may deem them as impervious. On the advantage side, this example or this option is directly proportional to the impact to the system. Those with the highest amount of impervious area, i.e. the highest amount of stormwater runoff, would be charged the most. Residential users, regardless of lot size, regardless of impervious area, would be charged a flat fee. So it would be very intuitive for your residential customers to understand. A follow-up addition to this would be, this certainly provides an incentive for your non-residential users to look for opportunities to reduce impervious area amongst their sites. Look for ways that they can capture and treat rainwater on site before discharging to one of the town transportation systems. Finally, under option number 3, we deem this as kind of a hybrid option. This would be a proportional approach in that those customers that have the highest impervious areas would be charged more, but this approach tries to relieve some of the day-to-day administrative burden on town staff. What you can see is on slide number 21 is a matrix in which we are showing an example of how the non-residential users may be broken out. Ideally, we would look for a threshold that we would have 50% of users to fall into one of 2 categories, either the 0 to 50% impervious or the 50 to 100% impervious. And each of the lot sizes, the impervious percentages would correlate back to a multiplier that's represented in the table at the top. And looking at slide number 22, we provided 2 different examples of how this can be seen. Again, under this option, residential users would remain at a flat fee. It would be up to council, up to town staff to determine what ratio of burden you want your residential versus your commercial users to share. Under a 50-50 share, we would look at something like a $6 a month residential fee, and then we would look at a unit cost of about $9 for the commercial. And again, that would be subject to one of the multipliers within the table. Likewise, you could look at something more closely aligned to your customer count, where 75% of the burden is based on residential customers, 25% will be shared by commercial. Under that scenario, your residential fee would increase to $11 a month. Your commercial would drop to approximately $2.40 prior to the multiplier. Again, these 3 options certainly represent opportunities for the town to take action to raise revenue for stormwater improvements. Additional conversation amongst council, amongst town staff would be required, depending on the opportunity or the direction that the town wants to take with regards to economic development for industrial or customer recruitment. All of those type factors would play into the level of stormwater revenue the town wants to generate and the specific means and methods to how that revenue is generated. So with that, I know that I've provided you with quite a bit of information in a very brief amount of time. I will certainly be glad to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability. If there are none, then I'll be glad to move on to the update on the Edenton Street Improvement Project.
Any questions?
What's the useful life of 36-inch or 48-inch stormwater piping? Do you have any idea how long they?
It depends on the material of piping. Traditionally, with a reinforced concrete pipe or RCP pipe, you can expect anywhere from a 50-year upwards to 75-year service life. If you look at some of the newer technology with the high-density polyethylene piping or HDPE piping, they advertise closer to a 100-year service life. I'm not sure any of us will be around to see the end of that service life, but their studies do indicate it to be 75 to 100 years.
Thank you.
All right. Moving to the next topic, and again, I'll be glad to circle back to any questions or follow-up conversation you may have, but looking at the Eden Street Stormwater Improvement Project, these will be slides number 23, 24, and 25 in your packet. Again, stemming from the initial study back in 2017, fast forward to today, working with town staff, the Wheaton Company was able to procure a approximately 50-50 grant with the Division of Water Resources. Through their implementation project, we have approximately $191,000 towards improvements at the Eden Street location. The town has a financial match of roughly about $97,000, with the Division of Water Resources kicking in roughly $94,000 in grant. Looking at slide number 24, we provided a picture of the Eden Street location. This is a town-owned parcel in which the town currently has about 1/10 of an acre on the south side of East Eden Street. This is in the heart of the 74-acre watershed that has been referenced several times tonight. In talking with town staff and looking at this particular parcel, the opportunity is present for the town to look at implementing an SCM, or stormwater control measure, that would provide namely treatment of stormwater. All stormwater collected within this watershed drains directly to Edenton Bay. And then secondly, would provide small amounts of attenuation, or essentially a capturing of stormwater on a temporary basis and then a controlled release. What you'll see at the bottom left of this project is what is referred to as a Filterra system. This is an engineered structure that is provided by Contact, which is a stormwater industry name. This given stormwater control measure is an approved engineered technology as considered by the state. The state has minimum design criteria that Contact was required to show evidence and documentation of to achieve this recognition as an approved technology. In evaluation of this particular parcel and the opportunities that we could use differing SCM devices, we looked at everything from wet detention basins to bioretention basins. We looked at the Contact stormwater system, which is essentially a buried vault that contains engineered pods. Think of an oversized K-cup for your Keurig that would essentially filter any type of stormwater coming in. And ultimately, we decided that the best technology available was this Filterra unit. For several reasons. One being, as you can see, the Filterra unit utilizes vegetation. In addition to Edenton being a coastal water-based community, I would say a close second would be in relation to the vegetation around the historic area of downtown. The trees within historic Edenton are of a high priority, not only from a tourism standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, but I would also go as far as to say a cultural standpoint. The attitude it generates amongst the residents and your invited guests We wanted to select a technology that continued this involvement and highlighted the importance of vegetation as it plays a part in your stormwater treatment. What you'll notice in this given unit is that the unit has essentially two different bays, or two different basins within one larger unit. The first is considered more of a 4-bay area. It controls some of that initial turbulence of the incoming stormwater, provides an opportunity for some of the sediment that's captured off your roadways to be deposited, and then ultimately the stormwater enters into the second chamber, which contains, in this case, a tree or some other type of vegetative structure, where the stormwater actually passes through the mulch and the media and is treated through that prior to exiting the structure. One of the unique advantages of this particular technology is the low obligation of maintenance. After this device is constructed, is placed into operation, it then becomes the obligation of the town to maintain it. The level of maintenance required for this is certainly on the lower end of the scale. Essentially, as long as the town maintains pruning or adequate maintenance of the selected vegetation, a tree, some type of grass product, and maintains the mulch on the top of the filter will work and will continue to remove any type of the nutrients and the contaminants that is part of the incoming stormwater. Looking into the final slide, number 25, we provided a contrast of the existing conditions on the left-hand side of the slide versus what is being proposed on the right-hand side. If you can decipher some of the spaghetti of mess between lines on the left-hand side, what you'll notice is the majority of the existing infrastructure falls outside of the town of Edenton parcel. Most notably, the 36-inch line, as well as some of the drop inlets, as well as the other junction boxes, actually fall on the parcel to the east of what is currently owned by the town of Edenton. Under the proposed project, what we would do is abandon those in place and relocate the same sized infrastructure back onto the town of Edenton's land. This would maintain the flow path that's currently there, but would return the structures back to a parcel that is owned and maintained by the town of Edenton. You'll also notice towards the north end of that would be a white square. That represents where this filter device would be placed within the parcel. We placed it there for ease of maintenance. It is closer to Eden Street, so the town staff would not have to provide equipment and materials towards the back side of the lot. As well as a hydraulic standpoint. Moving it closer to Eden Street allows us to keep all these devices as shallow to the surface as possible without creating the need to have extensive excavations or large amounts of fill material that's needed. Again, some reconfiguration under this approach would be required, which plays well with your current stormwater or your current street resurfacing project, as Eden Street is on the list of streets to be resurfaced. And so we will hopefully be able to time these two projects up such that the Eden Street improvements will be taken care of, immediately followed by the street resurfacing on Eden Street. Currently, the Wooten Company has finished our design and has provided town staff the opportunity to review this approach, as well as some of the finer details, and to give us comments prior to advertising this project to local contractors. With that, I'll be glad to, again, answer any questions on both the Eden Street project or the feasibility study if anyone has any follow-up questions.
Thank you for the detailed update, we certainly do appreciate it.
Anyone have any further questions of Will or comments or whatever? Will, I understand you're going to give a test on this after at the close of the meeting.
Absolutely, Anne Marie, if you'll go ahead and pass out the paper, I would appreciate it. But in all seriousness, we are extremely grateful to continue the partnership with the town. Anne Marie and Corey have both been a godsend for us on this side. And we just look forward to the opportunity to continue to serve the town and the town's residents.
Well, thank you. We thank you for your hard work that you put into this project, and we look forward to a continued relationship with your company.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Will. Terrific job, and it's so exciting to see, as Corey said earlier, our projects all coming together. And once we get past the current infrastructure, based on the feasibility study, we'll have a whole other round of projects to work on. So we're really looking forward to moving forward and trying to address, minimize flooding and improve the quality of the stormwater that ultimately discharges into the bay. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
There, it's all in the Public Works Committee.
Okay, and our next committee is the
Thanks, Will.
is the Finance Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Dixon. And in his absence, Councilman Coleman and Councilman High. Would one of you like to take on that duty?
Go ahead.
Don't fight over that.
Oh, yeah, we're not fighting over it at all. And I may have to rely upon Ms. Knighton for my assistance, for some assistance on that. As it relates to the designation of an application agent, each time that you receive any funds as a result of a disaster, we have to have an agent that can sign or speak on behalf of the town and in order to receive the funds. And we have been requested to appoint an agent. And is Virginia going to do that, Anne Marie, or are you going to do that?
We, between Virginia and Tammy and myself, we got it covered. So.
Okay, and do we need to take action either now or at the next meeting to designate those agents?
If you could recommend that be done at the regular meeting in December, yes, sir.
In absence of any objection, I would recommend that we move that forward to full council in December to approve and appoint those three as our agents as it relates to the FEMA funds. Mayor Stallings, the next matter is also involving some of the damages that we had and disaster assistance related to the most recent hurricane that struck Edenton. Anne Marie had pointed out in her report that there were very low impacts, but nonetheless we did expend a good amount of funds both on debris removal and also repairs to our electric distribution system that were damaged by the storms. Our packet included a grant agreement where the state has offered to pay the town for those damages that were incurred by the storm. And Anne Marie, do we need any action to be taken on that, or is that just a recommendation that we accept the funds?
And authorize the agreement at the December meeting.
Okay, there is as I mentioned, a grant agreement that was attached to our packet for tonight, and unless there's no objection, we certainly would welcome the assistance in paying for those damages, and we would move it forward to full council with the recommendation that we enter into the grant agreement such that the state could pay for those damages. and I would have pronounced the storm, but I had a hard time pronouncing the storm when it hit. And
It's
I've got a harder
It's a
time
difficult one to pronounce.
pronouncing it now, months later. But that is the report of the Finance Committee.
Okay, and I thank you, sir, for that good report. And that concludes our agenda for this evening, unless someone else has something for the good of the council that needs to come up. If not, I would like to wish everyone a happy and a safe Thanksgiving. Be safe, wear a mask, and practice the 3 W's. And, which is wash your hands, wait 6 foot apart, wear a mask that covers your nose and your mouth. Everyone have a good Thanksgiving and be safe.
Thanks.
Same to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.